Well, we're getting in news about Minister of State for Home, Kiren Rijiju, who has junked the argument of majority peace-loving Muslims not being responsible for minority extremists. Now, speaking at an event in Delhi, Rijiju took on the popular belief, saying that each community was responsible for its own. Let's just listen in to the comments, which are sure to raise a storm.
I personally feel that if we talk about the Islamic fundamentalism, then the fight against the terrorism has to be led by the Muslims. If there is a conduct which is a threat to the nation, maybe by a few extremist Muslim groups, by merely saying that we majority Muslims are okay, the few groups are responsible for it. For me, it is not enough. It doesn't matter whether it's a minority or a majority people are involved. The effect and impact is on everybody. If from my community, some groups have embarked upon a route which is destructive, it is not enough for me to say that, oh, they are just few groups from my society. I am directly responsible to ensure that they are tackled within our community.
Okay, Kamaljeet Sandhu joins us for more on this. Kamaljeet, at a time when the Prime Minister, during his trips abroad, has been stressing on the need to de-link religion from terror. We have, the Union Minister of State for Home Affairs saying absolutely the otherwise. His remarks are bound to snowball into a huge controversy.
Well, Kiren Rijiju has been there. He's been in the eye of the storm. But right now, with his comment, there would be a lot of furor because he says that if there is an Islamic fundamentalism, it has to be led by a war against them by the Muslims. And that is why he's saying by the community, if there's a problem with Buddhist community, then the war has to be led by the Buddhists. In Hindus itself, if there is a problem, if there is a communal angle to it, then there has to be a fight led by the Hindus themselves. So to each his own is something that he is actually saying. But this is a general sort of a remark that he's made, and he came out and he spoke about it later also. But the fact remains that ISIS, in terms of threat perception, may not be much. But yes, he did admit that there is an effort to recruit people from the South Asian continent, especially India. That effort has been on. Now remember, with intolerance and the parliament session, there is likely to be a lot of furor, even with the remark that Kiren Rijiju has made. But definitely, he came out, hit out at Amir Khan, saying this misconception of intolerance has been there, and remarks like these bring bad name to the nation as well as to the leadership of the Prime Minister Narendra Modi, saying that compared to 2012-13, as far as intolerance is concerned, perhaps India has done much better under the Modi regime. But yes, these are two aspects that he spoke about, one being the intolerance bit and obviously the other remark on ISIS, both likely to cause a lot of furor.
Oh, absolutely. But Kamaljeet, as it is, there's so much of protest that we have seen against, impediments to the freedom of speech and expression. Do you think that this was, unbecoming of a minister to speak something of this sort, saying that it's the moral responsibility of peace-loving Muslim majority, to keep a check on minority extremists? Because then the question can also be raised on the present government, that what the government has done to rein in, right-wing activists who have also been accused of making some rather insensitive comments and statements.
Well, Kiren Rijiju has always had a mind of his own, and he's spoken out earlier also. In this particular context also, he says that religion and terrorism cannot be brought in together. Terrorism has no borders. As a matter of fact, no region, religion, or no specific country can be responsible to fight against it. All global heads need to really come together. So that was more of a general feeling. But towards the end of it, he did make that remark that if there has to be a war which has to be led against the ISIS, it has the community from a Muslim leadership that should actually obviously be something which should be against that particular ISIS itself. And remember,
right.
Muftis and Imams, Avantika, in India have actually denounced ISIS. They've issued a fatwa against it. So there is something of this sort already on in India. But yes, this sort of remark, at least with political parties and the parliament session just around the corner, will tear into Kiren Rijiju's remark.
Absolutely. Let's just listen in to what Kiren Rijiju exactly had to say while he made those remarks.
I personally feel that If we talk about the Islamic fundamentalism, then the fight against the terrorism has to be led by the Muslims. If there is a conduct which is a threat to the nation, maybe by a few extremist Muslim groups, by merely saying that we majority Muslims are okay, the few groups are responsible for it, for me it is not enough. It doesn't matter whether it's a minority or a majority people are involved. The effect and impact is on everybody. If from my community, some groups have embarked upon a route which is destructive, it is not enough for me to say that, oh, they are just few groups from my society. I am directly responsible to ensure that they are tackled within our community.
Let's get in some more perspective from consulting editor Rajdeep Sardesai. You know, Rajdeep, it amazes me. You know, we have the Prime Minister going abroad and stressing on the need to de-link religion from terror. And here we have the Union Minister of State for Home Affairs saying that in the fight against, Islamic Jihad, we have to have peace-loving Muslims to join together to keep a check on minority extremists. What do you make of these comments made by the Minister?
I think there are two ways to look at it. At one level, yes, there is a serious problem of a section of Muslims who have got radicalized, and some of them have turned to terror.
Yes.
The tragedy would be if an entire community, as a result, had to bear the burden for the acts of a few. This is a national problem. This is a global problem. Terrorism is not a problem of one community alone, in terms of that community alone bearing the responsibility for taking on terror. So I think that is where the distinction has to be drawn. Yes, Mr. Rijiju is right that there has been a radicalization within a section of Islam which has led to the emergence of terror groups, but the responsibility for tackling that cannot be left to minority members in a manner to suggest that they bear the burden for the acts of other co-religionists, because that would be extremely unfair, and that is where it would be extremely unfair to link terror to just one religion.
True.
This is a global problem. The fact that what is true is that anyone who resorts to terror needs to be dealt with severely, and needs to be dealt with severely by all members across this country, whether Hindus, Muslims, or any religious community. So I think that's where I think Mr. Rijiju perhaps overstretched the argument, while his point is well taken that there is a radicalization which needs to be tackled, to then go on from there to suggest that the entire community must bear the burden for that radicalization and must act against it, I think would be running away from the responsibility of the state and of society to take a collective stand against terror.
Absolutely. In fact, Rajdeep, there can be also another argument to this, right? To the BJP, that what have they done? What have an organization done to rein in their own right-wing extremists, who have also been accused of making some rather insensitive remarks and rather controversial ones also? What have they done to rein in hotheads? I mean, if we're just talking about a particular section of society amongst any religion, not just one particular.
Look, this is a complex issue, and the worst thing that I think we can do is, posit it as my terror versus someone else's terror, or my hotheads versus someone else's hotheads. I think this needs to be dealt with, as I said earlier, as a national issue, as a global issue. The challenges exist at multiple levels, and yes, while as I reiterated earlier, there is a problem of radicalization that needs to be looked at. It can't be looked at through the prism of one community alone, in terms of asking that community alone to resolve the issue. I think unless we, this is a challenge which the government faces. This is a challenge which our security forces face, and this is a challenge every Indian faces. So I think Mr. Rijiju needs to send out that message. And let us all come together to tackle the challenge that is being posed by these terror groups who misuse religion. I mean, these are groups who are misusing religion to try and fulfill their own purposes, and somehow or the other they need to all come together. All right-thinking Indians need to come together to tackle these forces, and that's the message one would expect the Minister of State for Home to give. Which
didn't really come across. So one wonders, Rajdeep, what really will now be the opposition's retort to the statements made by Kiren Rijiju. But thank you so much for joining us and sharing your perspective.
नि स ग म म म नि प म ग नि प म ग स नि प म नि स प स। जहाँ तक याद आती रहेगी